everybody, it is Romania Black, and we're on episode 9 of Natsume's Book of Friends, or Natsume Yujin-Cho. And I feel like last episode, episode 8, was like a really good stopping point, but I'm going on vacation this coming week, so I was like, I really want to watch like one more episode before I go. So knowing my luck, this will be like a two-parter or have like some significance, and I'll want to immediately watch the next episode, but this is my choice. So, because last episode was so good. It was so heartwarming. It was such a great episode. Rule of 8, y'all. It just has not let us go wrong. And so we're on episode 9 now. And I felt like since last episode stopped off at a really good point, I don't know exactly what we're going to do to start out. Since this season is 13 episodes, it's going to be interesting to see like what is going to be the final arc, if we even have a final arc of this first season, because even though Natsume's character has been slowly evolving and developing as we've gone, at the same time, every episode's been kind of episodic, and there's not really been like a cliffhanger or anything like that. It's just been like, this episode we see this yokai, and this episode's this yokai, and it's not really been like an ongoing series. It's just felt very episodic, which is fine, but I'm curious going into this last act how that's going to work. So I've got a couple comments before we start. Gatsby17216 talks about the ED is a Shima Uda style, which is a traditional folk song from the Amami Islands in Okinawa. And that's kind of like the way that the song, it has very much in the US, my equivalent would be Hawaiian, kind of like it gives me like a ukulele, kind of like a folksy vibe to it, but also feels kind of, I don't know, tropical is not the word for it, but it just feels like something that I would not hear in my backyard. Let me say that. But it has a really cool folk song sound to it, and I really like it. So that's cool. And then Seppi's comment had a lot of really good ones going into episode 6. If you get to go to YouTube, Seppi's episode 6 comment has a lot of things. Natsume's bro friends. I've been trying to say like who they seem like to me. I'm like, who are they? They remind me of somebody. And Seppi hits the nail on the head with the hammer, saying that they're like Itaya and Ueki from Given. And I'm like, oh my God, they are. They're like those two bro characters there. Perfect comparison. That's exactly who they're like. Also, the character mask that Natsume wears in episode 6 during the festival, that the character on it means eye, which is really cool because it ties into Natsume's ability to see the yokai, but it also ties in that the Mei in Natsume can also translate to the word eye. So I like that. That's very cool. And then Futaba Village and its dam is a reference to the Ichifuba dam in Mizukami, which means flood, water, or liquid village in Kamamoto prefecture. And the dam used to be used for flood control and power production. So the idea that the Futaba village floods and is submerged represents that flooding threat. So I like that this series is also taking nods to actual places in Japan and to Japanese culture and history. That's really, really cool. And it's something that if you're not from Japan, you can still watch the show and get a lot from it, but you don't necessarily have to be a viewer. But if you are someone that recognizes all the little cultural symbolism, it's something that's really cool and kind of like adds to it, basically. So I thought that was really neat. So yeah, I'm super excited about the idea of getting into this episode and seeing what all we get. So I'm really glad everybody is really excited about Natsume's Book of Friends and like what all we're getting. I am too. So let's not waste any more time. Before we start though, I want to give a really quick shout out over to our philanthropy tier over on Patreon. I'm super grateful for all of the YouTube subscribers that I have and the patrons that I have as well. So I want to give a special shout out to the philanthropy tier, which is the highest tier. They get that perk, and that is Alex Cornejo, Anime Annie, Be Happy, Bryant Reed, Dana, Danger Zone, Devorin, Danny Don Mai, Destiny Marie, as well as Ichu, Eric, Ghostly Turnip, Fisho, Kiri, El Freya, Lyndon, Matthew Palfiniere, Murphew, Nicholas, Nameless Monster, Sunspots, Translucent Men, Trails, and Shimoyama. Thank you all so much for your support. I greatly appreciate it. All of my love. Now, I'm going to get ready to get started on this, and I'm so excited, but we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to start episode 9 of Natsume's Book of Friends, and we're going to do so here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do it. Wow. So I love this episode so much. I love the idea that we're introducing exorcists into the world of Natsume. I was wondering with all of these yokai, because the only thing that kept reminding me of it is Toilet Bound Hanako-kun, which I love that series. Oddly enough, Toilet Bound Hanako-kun has exorcists in their universe, and one particular family of exorcists are blonde, like our Notori, like our one exorcist here, Shuichi. They're blonde as well. So I was like, wow, that's like such a crazy circumstance, such a crazy coinkydink. But ever since we knew about the yokai, and I was like, this is kind of like Hanako-kun, I was thinking, are there going to be exorcists? And then trying to take the exorcist mentality towards yokai and comparing it with Natsume's perspective, which is what we do in this episode. And it's really interesting. So we're going to talk about that with this. I'm going to be doing some comparisons to Toilet Bound Hanako-kun a few times, because that's what I was thinking of. So if you've not watched Toilet Bound Hanako-kun, there will be like a few, they're not really spoilers at all. They're like, you'll find them out like the first time you meet these characters within the first like moments you know them. So they're not really spoilers, but it is a little light discussion. So just kind of be aware of that there's gonna be a little light Toilet Bound Hanako-kun discussion. Highly recommend Toilet Bound Hanako-kun. If you've not read it or watched it, you should definitely do it. The manga is longer and better than the anime, but it's really good. The anime only has one season, but it's still really good. I, like Natsume with his little newsboy, like journalist news cap. It doesn't match his shirt at all. But who am I to talk about fashion? But it is cute. I think it's really distinct. It's a distinctive little cap that he wears. It's like Sherlock has their cap, Natsume has their cap. It works really well. I also like the idea that Madara is getting fat. Madara is eating and drinking all the time and is not putting in the work to burn off them calories. So I love the idea of Natsume just taking Madara out on a walk, which, you know what? My family have cats. They have farm barn cats. They have a cat inside. I've never taken a cat on a walk before because I feel like cats just hate it, but my friend who lives in the city does have a cat that has a harness, and he's taken them on walks before, so who am I to judge? I just love the idea. Is it an earthquake? I also like the idea that because Madara is secretly a yokai posing as a cat, like the earthquake thing, they are like a big spirit, so they do have some weight there. But Madara, for all his talk of being this like superior spirit and most elegant in kind, a damn grasshopper gets him to run off like a cat. I'm like, Madara, you definitely are taking a little bit too seriously to your role. But he runs into our actor fellow here, who is such an interesting character. He has all of these reflexes and everything. He looks a lot like Natsume. My first thought, because he was blonde, kind of like Natsume, my first thought was, are they secretly related? And Natsume's family are exorcists, but that kind of gets thrown to the wayside. My second thought was, this guy's really hot and everybody seems to notice him, but Natsume kind of looks like him, so why is everybody not noticing Natsume? Give him some love. He looks like this guy. Kind of. My third thought is that he reminds me of Tamaki from Ouran High School Host Club, especially any moment that he has all the roses behind him. He seems very much like Tamaki, where he's like, oh, I'm the prince. I'm, very glamorous, all the girls love me. I have lots of fangirls. He reminded me of that. Also, he reminded me whenever Natsume said that he had like the same air to him as Madara does, I was instantly thinking of like Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen, because Gojo has like this trolling attitude, kind of like Madara, but then he always has these girls like fawning over him because he's really attractive. Kind of gave me that same vibe. But interestingly enough, the whole thing of kind of seeming like Madara, it reminded me with Notori, reminded me of the fact that Notori hates yokai seemingly, so he has this negative view of this other species, kind of like Madara doesn't like humans, so that same notion there. But also because Notori is around spirits all the time, he kind of has the same vibe as Madara because he's a yokai. So I thought that was interesting. He's like, I thought Sensei had taken human form for a second. Yeah, interestingly enough, it seems like Madara can only take the form of Reiko, because that's the human he knows most. But Interesting. Yokai exorcism. Now, Crunchyroll calls this episode Ayakashi exorcism. I want to look up what Ayakashi means. Ayakashi meaning. It means, a collective name for yokai that appear above the surface of a body of water. That's oddly specific. So we'll just say yokai exorcism is probably what's going to be on the title of the episode. So this spirit that has the rope attached to her neck, and I had a much darker interpretation of her at first, which I'm glad we got the understanding of why she has the bandage and what's the deal with the rope, even though it's dark in itself. My whole thing at the beginning was when we first saw her, I thought that she was like the spirit of someone who'd hung themselves and committed suicide. And that I thought that the bandage wrapping was like that she had attempted self-harm and had not succeeded in that. So she hung herself and that's how she committed suicide. And then she became this spirit that haunted that mansion. That was what I thought it was, which is a much darker, you can tell other series that I've watched on the channel, a much darker interpretation than what it actually is. It's just a monk made her like, basically took her like a leash, tied a rope around her neck like a dog collar and strapped her to the storehouse and said, you're going to basically stay here and guard the storehouse, or if you try to escape, it's going to decapitate you. Still freaking dark, and we see that she tried to escape once and she hurt her hand, and then Notori came and he helped to heal her hand up, and that was it. But she has this negative view of humans, obviously, because she's been chained to a building. I want to note that whenever she tells him she's like buzz off, basically, to Natsume, we cut to Madara and a shot of him and he's just staring at her. And I like some of the ways that they depict Madara and his reactions to the yokai interactions with Natsume, because it's almost like Madara kind of relates to her in that moment. Like, he was stuck in that little shrine for who knows how long, we presume by Reiko. He was stuck there, so he seems to kind of like understand the resentment she carries towards humans because she was trapped there. She can't move on. She can't be free. And Madara's like, yeah, girl, I get that. I was like that too, and now I'm with this kid. So I feel like Madara, oftentimes, it's really subtle. This whole series is subtle. It's just subtlety, but it does it really well, and it's so good. And I feel as if Madara, like, in some ways, every time we see him just like look at a spirit but not say anything, I'm always curious, what is he thinking in this moment? And we don't get to know what that is. We can just kind of speculate and guess as he's looking at her. Interesting. And so Madara's like, hey, you're not helping your cause. Stop talking. You don't have to talk to every single spirit you encounter. I like that Madara kind of tells Natsume, he's like, not every spirit, as we found out from prior episodes, like with the firefly spirit in the last episode, he's like, not every spirit has its name in the book. You're not going to be able to set free every spirit, and you don't have to. You shouldn't be required to. And I feel bad for Natsume, because then he has this vision of all the people who kind of get onto him and call him a liar for seeing spirits, and he's like, damn, he's like, I wish I could forget about all that. And as much as I want Natsume to keep growing and moving past all these negative like moments of his past, I think the show does a nice job of reminding us that even as we make progress, even as we grow, we oftentimes will be reminded of those moments in the past where we had weakness or where they were unpleasant moments. And it's just hard to get around that. So I feel for Natsume. I really, really do. I feel for him. I don't feel for Madara, though, when he goes out drinking and he's like, gone drinking. Natsume's like, again, really? And then that's when the paper yokai shows up, the yokai that can turn into the slip of paper. I honestly thought, when we didn't see Madara until the cafe scene, what I thought happened was that Notori had basically captured Madara and was going to try to exorcise him. As soon as we find out he's an exorcist and we hadn't originally seen, like, it would have been, like, I feel like he had captured him and I was like, oh no. And then that doesn't end up being the case at all. The yokai that can turn into the slip of paper, that one reminds me a lot of the scene from Spirited Away when Chihiro, when there's all like the little paper men that come after her and she has to like shut the door. The moment that Natsume shut the door, it reminded me of Spirited Away. And then like Madara kind of looks like Haku. So, we have that moment there. But that scene was genuinely frightening. And it also shows that the yokai can be really dangerous when they're not in the Book of Friends. Because the thing about it is, when they're in the Book of Friends, Natsume could, one, control them, or two, he could like say, hey, I'll set you free if you let me go. But in this case, the yokai that are working with Notori, they're not in the Book of Friends. So they can act independently of it, and the Book of Friends is not even like a bargaining chip. And so that being mentioned at this point in the series is like, oh, that could be a problem later on. I like that this episode introduces some forms of conflict that could definitely have impact later on. But additionally, it also still keeps with the themes and the tone and the ambiance of the series without compromising that, which I like a lot. So I do think it's hilarious how Notori tries to like keep his disguise. He's wearing an Urahara bucket hat from Bleach and some Midorima sunglasses. Like, in the grand tradition of anime characters like Oikawa and Midorima from Kuroko's Basketball, who think that they can disguise themselves by putting on like one item, I'm like, who you fooling? But then again, Notori is an actor and a celebrity, so he probably has to go in disguise a lot. But I'm like, is that all it takes? It's great. So yeah, he ends up saving Natsume. And one thing I am so intrigued about is the concept that they both come at their experience with yokais from different means. Like, you have on one end Natsume, who has decided he's going to free the yokai. He's trying to get along with them. He's trying to coexist between two realms, the realms of the living and the realms of the dead. And he has this kind of fondness and compassion for the yokai. And he feels like just as they are outcasts from a spirit realm, he feels like an outcast in the human realm, so he can relate to them. And over time, Natsume's initial like indifference and disgruntlement at the yokai have kind of dissipated and grown into something a bit more soft and compassionate. And we see the opposite with Notori, who starts out really kind and is like, hey, even though my mom died, my family shunned me. And I'm like, oh my God, you have this tragic backstory. He like starts out being compassionate to the yokai. And then as he grows older, he gets more bitter and more kind of negative towards them and his experiences. And you have two opposites where Natsume is trying to set the yokai free. He doesn't want to control them. He doesn't even want to have the option to control them. He wants to let them go. And then you have Notori, who's gaining like a following of all these spirits serving him. And so there's these polar opposites here. And in any other anime, we would have ended the episode with it being like, well, we don't see eye to eye, so we're going to be destined as rivals. And it was going to be like that. And Natsume Yujin-Cho does not do that. They're like, at the end, it's the most civil thing ever, where Notori's like, well, we don't see eye to eye. But it's like that. There's a country song. I can't think of the name. I don't know if it's Dwight Yoakam. I don't know who sings it, or Montgomery Gentry. I can't think of it. But it's like, I'm not a singer, but he's like, there ain't no bad guy. There ain't no good guy. There's only you and me, and we just disagree. Like, that's the song. And it's supposed to be like a breakup song. But the whole point of it is like, there's no villain here. There's no antagonist. It's just two people who we both understand that we don't agree. And it's just like, we're just two people and we disagree, and that's all there is to it. What do we do from here? And that's most of life. You meet people and they disagree with you, and it's either you're going to make it a spectacle, you either make it this drama-filled, like angry just thing that goes nowhere, or you both communicate and go, can we still talk? Are we cool being friends? Can we be bipartisan in this and just like get along? And I love that. I was like, yes, absolutely. Why can't we do this? So, but yeah, but the idea of, I'm very curious because when we're introduced here with Notori, he kind of has like a Reiko vibe to him, right? And it almost makes me wonder if Reiko was kind of like Notori, because we know how Natsume is, but did Reiko, he seems kind of like what I assumed Reiko was at the beginning. I assumed when we first met Reiko that she had this army of yokai at her disposal and was using them however she wanted to. And we now know that that's not the case. But with Notori, he's got these followers of yokai that follow him and do what he wants. He don't have no book of friends. He just naturally is enigmatic and has this personality, or at least I wonder if the lizard yokai that inhabits him, I thought maybe for a second they were going to say that it was his mom, and his mom clings to him like his mom's spirit, which would have been really touching and sad. I wonder if the lizard spirit that's on him allows the yokai to follow him because they kind of recognize him like a yokai because he has the spirit on him. It's maybe that's why Natsume thought that he was like Madara, because he had the spirit attached to him that was kind of possessing him. Maybe, possibly. I love the idea that the spirit is just this little like bottom feeder, just this little host that just basically crawls all over him, right? I really like that. And it's kind of like, you know, you see some fish that are in like a fish tank and they have like little sucker fish that's like a host to them. They're harmless. They don't really do anything. They just hitch a ride and then get off when they need to. That seems like the little salamander spirit. It's a really cool design. I love Notori's design. His character design and the design of having like the little crawly spirit of the salamander on him. Love it. It's a really good design. So Tanuma, I don't know if the show is trying to hint that Tanuma doesn't like men or that Tanuma just doesn't like men like Notori. Y'all that ship Tanuma and Natsume, you explain that to me in the comments down below. I took it as him saying he doesn't like guys, but who knows? Who knows? I do like that Tanuma does say, he's like, I have a life. I watch TV. And Natsume's like, well, I'm busy all the time with these spirits. I don't have time for the TV show. It felt very much like when I'm going to take a picture of that. When we see Notori out there like waving to the classroom, it felt very much like a Neon Genesis moment where it was like Masato coming to see Shinji. But yeah, he's like, he's not the type I take an interest in. Or maybe that means, he's like, he's not the type I take an interest in. Maybe Tanuma saying that the flashy guys aren't his type and he likes the more soft-spoken, kind and gentle types. Like Natsume. Maybe. Who knows? Who knows? Not me shipping over here. Don't mind me. We don't see Sasada this episode, so that's good. I guess when you do get Notori and Natsume next to each other, they do look a little bit different, but I also really like the black and green combo that Notori wears. He just looks great. He just looks great. And I love that he has all of the yokai at his disposal. And he's like, yeah, this thing moves around my body. I can't get rid of it. And it doesn't seem to harm me. And then, of course, I like that Madara pops up. I really thought Madara had been kidnapped at this point and held against his will. And Notori was going to try to, like, hold him as a hostage against Natsume unless he helped him. Glad that wasn't the case. Glad we worked it out beyond that. But I love Madara being like, don't talk to my meal, kid. I love it. And it seems like Notori takes an interest in Madara. I also love that the woman's like, this ain't a cat cafe. Get out of here. And so he's like, oh, you have a very cute little servant. And of course, Madara's like, I'm not his servant. How dare you? But yeah, basically Notori is gathering up this army of yokai that are his servants. And I do like that Natsume tells him at the end, he's like, you know, the way that you do things is not my style. I don't like the idea of having servants. I don't like the idea of like making people follow me. He's like, that's not my deal. I'm not my jam. I'm not about it. And Notori, I like that he's like, cool, you do you and I'll do me. And it's like, oh, damn. I like that. That's interesting. So they have this thing about the storehouse, and we find out that it's basically just a means for Notori to catch the one spirit he's trying to exorcise, right? Meanwhile, we have the Book of Friends brought up when this one spirit shows up. And he's like, it's okay. You can just talk to me about it. It's fine. And Natsume's like, okay. This spirit that shows up was absolutely terrifying. It was really scary. I was like, oh, damn. Not as scary, though, as the fact that Notori took a stick. I was wondering what that weapon was, but it's just a branch, like a stick from a tree, and he put a talisman through it and stabbed the yokai. And Natsume is like, whoa, I'm not about you hurting them. And he's like, well, they could hurt humans. In Toilet Bound Hanako-kun, and this is where I wanted to talk about it, in Toilet Bound Hanako-kun, there is a family of exorcists, and one of the exorcists, he does not exactly like the methods that the rest of his family does and uses. So he constantly is like, well, do we have to kill them? Do we have to exorcise them this way? Do we have to be violent with them? And the one exorcist is like, yes, this is how it has to happen. This is how we've always done it. This is tradition. This is what we got to do. And the one that's one of the main characters in the story, his whole arc with his character is all about questioning, like, why is tradition the way that it is? How does it go about it? But the one character, his name is Ko, he reminds me a lot of Natsume in that he's a lot more nonviolent, a lot more pacifist, a lot more let's help out the yokai, kind of move on to the next life rather than violently kill them. And then Teru is another character, and Teru reminds me of Notori. And he's like, nope, we got to exercise them. This is how it goes. They're just spirits. It's not like they're already dead. And, Ko is like, well, that's not the point. So I feel like the same conflict that we see in Toilet Bound Hanako-kun, and part of it is the same conflict we see here with Notori and Natsume. And what's interesting is in Toilet Bound Hanako-kun, it's kind of viewed the same way. They both kind of at the end of the day go, well, this is just the way I'm going to do it. You do you, I'm going to do me. And, one way or another isn't exactly, we do it whatever way we can. But damn, stabbing that spirit in the eye, that sucks for them. But I do like Natsume being like, look, I want to get to know you. But I can't do things the way you do. Also, Notori is really tall, or Natsume is not that tall. But there's a lot of good shots in this episode. So then we get the story about the little boy helping the spirit tie the bandage around her hand, and how she was grateful to him. And Natsume figures out that it was Notori. And she's like, karma is a strange thing. He's come back as an exorcist. So she knew all along that he was probably going to exorcise her. And she's like, I'm ready to go. It's hard to be a monster. I can't even thank him for this strip of cloth. I'm glad she follows him in the end, though. The one thing about it that was the one line that the spirit said to Notori that gets repeated from Notori to Natsume is the line that you're such a sweet child, but still you're a child. And at the time during the reaction, I was like, oh, that's a little condescending because it's suggesting that Natsume is a kid. And once he becomes an adult, he'll understand why Notori is doing the things that he's doing. But I really don't think it was meant to be as nefarious as it seems in the episode. That's the one thing. I'm used to watching series where the characters saying mean, condescending things are meaning to be mean and condescending. And in this series, it's not like that at all. So you kind of have to readjust your specs to be used to this series. It's not doing that same procedure, right? Now, he draws this transmutation looking circle and says, erase the circle that's drawn on the ground. Take a piece of the rag and do that. And Natsume's like, I don't want to be a part of this. He's like, do you know the yokai that you're going to exorcise today? And he's like, yeah, it's being held captive by a rope around its neck. And then he's like, I should get rid of it quickly. And he sets everything up. And Natsume assumes that he doesn't remember. Now, it seems like he does. And I'm like, so he was trying to free the yokai from its rope, and then he was like, worst case scenario, she's exorcised and she's free to go to the afterlife. Best case scenario, I've set her free from her prison and she becomes my servant. But of course, Natsume, there was kind of some Full Metal Alchemist vibes in the scene, not only with the circle, but with the one yokai's hair wrapping around Natsume. It reminded me a lot of Full Metal Alchemist, and I can't say more without spoiling. But yeah, then she shows up and starts to get exercised. She doesn't really seem bothered by it, but Natsume's like, no, I gotta go help him. The fact that Natsume could break through the yokai's hair, I think is pretty significant, showing how much stronger he's gotten. And then he goes to save the spirit, but then Madara's like, damn it, I gotta rescue him. And that's when he can see. I like how Natsume is able to see into the memories of the yokai as they're being exorcised. And then he helps the yokai, and the yokai falls in love with him. Ugh. Humans don't have the power to bring misfortune. Yeah. She's like, you're just a child. The idea, and I like that he kind of blushes at her. I'm grateful to have met you. Poor Natsume. Him and Madara got actually hurt by the lightning, which is rough, right? And that's when he says, I didn't notice it was the yokai. The spiritual binding around her neck has burned away. I figured it could go either way. I'd either release this poor yokai from her bonds and she'd cease to exist, right? Or I would, if done right, the rope would burn and she'd have her freedom and her life. And then we get to see like her face and everything. Mm-hmm. Interesting. So yeah, he was just letting it go either way. And I like that Natsume is like, look, that's really cool that you were like giving it a 50-50 chance, but that's not the way I would have done it. So we'll just have to disagree on the methods, right? And he's like, you remind me of how I used to be, and I thought there may be something I could say to you. I just wanted to talk. And Natsume's like, yeah, same. I like that they get to talk finally, that they clear it up and they're like, hey, we just wanted to talk. We're two people from the same background. We should be able to communicate with one another. It is bringing up the idea, though, that there are exorcists in this world. So while Natsume was able to reach Notori and they were able to talk it out, and Notori acknowledged, how he used to be, and he still has that resentment towards the yokai, and he's not opposed to using them as servants. The part of me is like, this is like a 7-season series. So it will not be surprising to me if we manage to get other exorcists who are different than Notori up in this story. That rhymed, and it was not intentional. But I'm thinking that now we've entered the world where exorcists are present here. It's not going to surprise me if we see more, basically. So do what you do with that, right? But I thought that was really interesting. Yes. And then I like that Notori's like, well, I can't use you as my assistant, so I'm going to move on my way, get my train ticket, and go. And Natsume's kind of like, I work alone. I'm not really anybody's underling or assistant, whatever. But yeah, he's like, you're one to talk. Why were you sulking so much? You were such an innocent kid. And he's like, what did you say? He's like, you can call me weak if you want, but I can't agree with your methods. I like how tall he is. And he's like, that's fine. He's like, we don't have to have the same opinions on everything. I wish that every show would go into it walking in with this viewpoint of we don't have to agree on everything. And I'm like, oh, damn. That you've just solved the internet's problems. That line there, we don't have to have the same opinions on everything. Natsume Yujin-Cho, Natsume's Book of Friends has solved all the problems. We need to read this line, watch this episode, and we're going to be fine. See? Problems are solved. And I like that he's like, if you're ever in trouble, let me know. Which means we'll probably see him again, which I'm really excited about. Except now he has like a little mini yokai harem. There are all these female yokai following him around, or female presenting yokai following him around. We know the yokai don't really have gender. But yeah. Now, Madara says that she was finally set free. She took the name of Hiragi and is going to work for Notori-san. Now, Hiragi is a name from Given, speaking of which. And Hiragi, the name meaning for it, means holly tree or holly bush. It's a connection to the outdoors or nature. So, yeah. Here's the thing. Madara says, I bet it's because she's in love. We have established throughout this entire series so far that yokai and humans can come to love one another and have bonds that seem romantic. I know people in the comments have tried to be spoilery and tried to be like, Madara and Reiko don't have a relationship. Let me ship them. Let me ship them in peace until we know more about Reiko. But I feel like Madara loved Reiko. Even if it was unrequited, I feel like he loved her. But we'll see. Others can't understand what makes someone happy. Only they can. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the case. Happiness is individualized, right? We can't always predict what's going to make someone happy versus making another person happy as well. This episode was so much fun. I loved it. I loved the design of Notori. I loved the tension and the conflict between Natsume. I like Natsume being able to argue with another human, being like, no, I don't think this about the yokai. No. Natsume is becoming an advocate for the yokai. He's becoming a human representative and ambassador for them. And I see in the future Natsume coming into conflict with other exorcists, right? I feel like Notori was pretty open-minded at the end of it all, where he was like, yeah, I don't agree with you either, but we're all cool. It's all fine. I have a feeling there's probably going to be exorcists that show up that do not share that same viewpoint. And Natsume is going to have to deal with them somehow. But who knows? In any case, oh my gosh, this episode was so good. I loved it. It was absolutely adorable. And it was so cool getting some like tension and conflict, new characters, new world building. I'm super excited to hear your thoughts down below. And luckily, it didn't feel like a two-parter, so I can go on my vacation now. and not feel crazy about it. So, good. So, in any case, I am excited. I hope y'all are too. But I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back very soon with episode 10 of Natsume's Book of Friends, Natsume Yujin-Cho. Bye.